Hi, I'm Mark Lawson, president of Morningstar Music Publishers, and this is the first in a series of interviews with Stephen Hamilton. For many years, Stephen was the organist at the historic Church of the Holy Trinity in New York City, and he has presented his workshop on organ literature for churches for numerous AGO, national, regional, and local events. This series will focus on some of Stephen's favorite collections and composers. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us for these interviews.
Well, I'm happy to be doing this because church music means a great deal to me, one of my favorite topics.
So you've been active for a number of years in doing these workshops on organ literature for AGO conferences. Tell us how you became interested in this and how you got started doing it.
Well, it is an interesting story. From 1972 to 1986, I taught at a private school in Virginia Intermont College, that had a magnificent Flantrop organ. And I thought it'd be really great to have a fall conference. And since in the South, we have lots and lots and lots of churches, it seemed to be the logical thing is to kind of concentrate on church music. So I would have a guest organist come and perform. We had, David Craighead and Marie-Claire Allan 4 times, and Dame Jillian came and played, and Jim Meeser and David Bowman and so forth all came and played concerts. And then on a Friday night, and then on Saturday, we would have a day of church music. And sometimes we would have a hymn playing session. And then I got into church music repertoire for this conference. And then your predecessor, Rodney, called one day and said, "You should come and do this for an AGO chapter." And I said, "Well, okay." And we made a syllabus and we prepared a handout and so forth. And we did one and then we did another, and it was very popular. And then now I've done this presentation for 7 national conventions of the American Guild of Organists, 6 regional conventions, and numerous AGO chapters all over the United States, with so few actual stores selling music. Many people don't have an opportunity to go and look through the stacks. So this was a wonderful opportunity to make suggestions, play some music for them, and also maybe remind them where a new tune could fit into something that's already in their repertoire. And it seems to be very successful and really quite necessary in this day and age of researching new music.
It is. And I think that, from my experience of going to numerous conventions over the years, that one of the favorite things for people to do is kind of gather in the booth after one of these and start talking about literature. What did you play? What do you play for this? What do you do for that? Looking for ideas. So this is really a great gift to organists all over. So the piece we're going to look at today is one that you picked that is actually an older piece in our catalog. So I'm really grateful that we get to revisit it because I think it's a wonderful piece. A little collection called 3 Organ Preludes on American Folk Hymns by Kenton Coe. I have it in my hands right here. And so I know that you wrote an extensive article on Kenton Coe for the American Organist back in 1996. Can you give us a little background on your work with Kenton and then a brief summary of his career?
I'd be delighted to. I met Kenton under very unusual circumstances. As I was telling you, I had this church music conference at Virginia Intermont College. And in 1973, Marie-Claire Allan came to play a concert. And at the reception, she said to me, "Do you know the American composer Kenton Coe, who lives in Johnson City, Tennessee?" And of course, I thought I knew everything back then. And I said, "Well, no, I don't." She said, "Well, you should." And it just happened that Kenton came to the concert and he was across the hall where we had the reception, and I flagged him over and I said, "I don't know you, Mr. Coe, but this is Marie-Claire Allan." And Marie-Claire said, "Stephen, this is Kenton Coe." Marie-Claire's brother, Olivier, had written a review of Kenton's opera, Sude, that had been premiered at the Paris Opera. Kenton's the only American to have had an opera premiered at the Paris Opera. And so we had this immediate connection. And since he was just 15 miles away from where I was living, we became friends, and I got interested in his music making. And he became the subject of my dissertation from the Manhattan School of Music. And after I'd written the dissertation, the AGO magazine said, maybe you could shorten this a little bit, which was terribly difficult, and we could publish it. So it was published in the July 1996 issue of the American Organist. Then from there, I had the privilege of playing his organ concerto for organ, strings, and percussion with the Toulouse Orchestra at the Festival du Comage in France. And then subsequently, it's had 2 performances in New York City at my church, the Church of the Holy Trinity, as well as Trinity Church on Wall Street. And it's been successfully, reviewed and all that kind of thing. And then I said to Kenton, how enthusiastic are you about writing organ music? And he said, well, I've thought about it, but I don't know that much about how the instrument actually works. So he came to the Flantrop organ and we had an organ lesson. And then I took him to my church where I had a large electric pneumatic instrument with all the buttons and bells and whistles, so he could see how that would work. And then from there, he wrote the Fantasy for Organ for me, which was the subject of that dissertation. And since then, I probably have played the Fantasy for Organ maybe 20 times in recitals. Oddly enough, it's often requested when I play concerts in Europe. I'm playing 6 concerts in 2022 in Germany, and 3 of them have said, would you play Mr. Coe's Fantasy for Organ? So I shall. And then I thought, well, the Fantasy for Organ is not a church music composition. It's 15 minutes long. And I said, maybe you would consider writing some chorale preludes that would be accessible for standard liturgies. And maybe you could write something from Melodies from the Sacred Harp, which is a wonderful book that everybody in the South knows and loves. So he wrote 12 preludes for me from Melodies from the Sacred Harp, and Morning Star has published these 3. So that's how we kind of got into the organ part of Mr. Coe's career.
That's wonderful. Wonderful story. So the first one we're going to hear is a setting of What Wondrous Love. Anything specific you'd like to point out about this particular piece before we hear it?
Well, the thing about Kenton's music that's so accessible is that it is lovely music. It's in the style of Aaron Copland and Samuel Barber. It's not dissonant in the sense of being obtuse, but it's lovely music. And this one makes use of the canon quite extensively and then puts the melody in the pedal, which is really workable, and also makes use of the quieter sounds of the instrument. So if you were to have a beautiful crumhorn or a beautiful cornet, that would work. Or we always sometimes estimate the power of an 8-foot principal as a melody stop. So regardless of the size of the instrument, all of these chorale preludes would work on what I would call a small instrument. And by that, I mean something that's under 12 ranks.
Good. Well, let's hear What Wondrous Love. Before we do the next piece, I know people will want to know where you recorded these and a little bit about the organ.
Well, I recorded these at St. Mark's Catholic Church here in Minneapolis, which is on Dayton Avenue in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's a 3-manual Hendrickson pipe organ. Charles Hendrickson was an organ builder in St. Peter, Minnesota, and there's probably 25, 30 of his pipe organs in the region. And this one is in a lovely, lovely acoustic. It's 50 stops, and Charles died in January, and several of us were asked to record something on various instruments for the Sioux Trails chapter of the American Guild of Organists, of which he was a member, as a tribute to him. So I discovered this instrument through the Fantasy in G minor, as I played it on this instrument for a tribute to Charles. And then when we were discussing this project, I made contact with Nathan Cicero, the organist choir master there, and he said, "Oh, we would love to have you come back and tape this." The instrument has beautiful sounds and has a lovely, lovely acoustic.
Well, now we're going to hear My Shepherd Will Supply My Need. Any comments about this particular piece?
This is a particularly sweet composition because it begins with a lovely obligato in the right hand, and it has a sweeping note, yada da da dum, and this forward motion then propels the melody, ti ta tom, which has this forward progression in its genre, and you take that with the obligato plus the sweep of the melody, just comes together beautifully and is extremely melodic. Again, Kenton has put one of the variations in the pedal, which is fine, and ends it with this obligato. Sometimes when I play it in a recital, I use an 8-foot flute for this obligato, and sometimes if I have a beautiful 4-foot flute, I'll use the 4-foot flute for this obligato. And I think that's the nice thing about these pieces, because you can be very creative with them, with the registrations that you have on your pipe organ.
before we play the Amazing Grace setting, do you want to say anything about the collection as a whole and how you've used it, or how you know other people have used it?
I'd be happy to. Sometimes when I play a recital in a church, and I'll ask them, what kind of tunes do you want me to play? And they always talk about, well, most of the time you can play what you want, but it'd really be nice to have something really familiar. And to me, that means the toccata and fugue in D minor or the Vita or toccata. And you can't make a whole career on playing just the D minor toccata and fugue or the Vita or toccata. So I said, well, what about some chorale preludes on very familiar hymn tunes? So lots of times in the second half of the program, I will play these 3 chorale preludes in the order that you're presenting them. And people love it because they recognize the melodies, and they're very introspective and just comforting. And I think that's really says a lot about Mr. Coe's writing. The other thing about it is that I like these chorale preludes, all of them that he's written, because they can follow the liturgical year and fit so well into service playing. What Wondrous Love, a lovely Lenten tune, works. It works as a funeral tune. Amazing Grace, that everybody loves, can be used in many, many different ways. We have something after Easter called Good Shepherd Sunday, and My Shepherd Supply My Need works out really well. Then the other thing about it is that you can find these chorale prelude titles in many collections, and sometimes it's really fun putting something that was written in 1930, 1940, and pairing it with something that was written in 1990 together, so you have a kind of a musical perspective of composition, and they just work very well that way. And it's, as I think I said, they work well on a large instrument and they work well on a small instrument. So these are very versatile compositions, and I think that's one thing about the collection that I like so much.
Let me tell people how they can find this collection on our website. If you go to the organ section of the website, and you can simply go up to the top and in the search part, put in the last name Coe, C-O-E, and it will pop right up. And I think you can then see samples of everything that's in the collection, and you also be able to hear complete recordings of Stephen playing these pieces. Well, before we close, do you have any final thoughts on the music of Kenton Coe you'd like to share, or anything about this collection in particular?
Well, Mr. Coe is a living composer. He was born in 1930. So it's lovely playing music by a living composer. And I think that's really important. I think thematic Sundays in church are important too. You could have an all Buxtehude Sunday. You could have an all Jean Lalande Sunday, an all Messiaen Sunday. If you want to have a quote unquote contemporary Sunday of contemporary organ music, this is something that would fit into that particular niche as you plan your liturgies. I think it's lovely that we have these chorale preludes that are so musical and introspective and really set a wonderful tone for any church liturgy. So I think everybody should have this. And if I were at a convention, I'd say, as you leave the convention today, I'm going to look into your bag of music and make sure you have this collection of 3 chorale preludes by Mr. Coe.
Well, we're all looking forward to the day when we can go to a convention, and you can say that. So,
I do.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your insights on this music. And also, I'm looking forward to talking to you about other subjects in the future. So thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. And I look forward to the future as well.